All right, do you see the slides only, not without the notes?
Yes.
All right, should I start? Okay. Hey, everybody, thank you all for being here. My name is Wahib. I'm a first-year fellow within the Rutgers program at Genentech, and I have my very great co-fellow, Kim, here, who is also a recent graduate of OSU. I went to UCSF, and today we're just going to be talking about the Rutgers Fellowship Program and hopefully convincing you guys to apply to fellowships. I just wanted to see how many of you here are P1s and P2s and how many are P3s, P4s? Is it just mostly P1s and P2s? A couple P4s?
No, there's P3s and P4s.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. Yeah, so I remember a year or two ago, I was in your shoes and I was struggling to figure out what I wanted to do after graduation. I was lucky enough to have some friends in industry and doing fellowships, and that helped me. They helped me figure out that I want to do a fellowship. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the cool things that are part of fellowships that will hopefully convince you to apply here. So the agenda for today is we are going to provide you an overview of the Rutgers program, then talk about the application process, then explore opportunities for pharmacists in industry, then talk a little bit about resources and additional information. And then hopefully we'll have time for a Q&A session. Although me and Kim were talking and we decided that if you all have questions that come up as we're going through, feel free to post them in the chat and then we'll go over the questions from the chat at the very end, if that's okay with you all. So what is an industry fellowship? So I assume a lot of you are more familiar with residencies than fellowships. At least I was when I was a student at UCSF. But a pharmaceutical industry fellowship is a postdoctoral training, just like the residency is. However, the practice setting is a little bit different. So both training programs are patient-focused and they require you to use your clinical skills you learned in school. They offer opportunities for teaching, research, and publications. But the main difference between a fellowship and residency being that the fellow works more in a corporate setting, so a pharmaceutical company, with indirect patient contact, whereas a resident will be working directly with patients in a hospital or retail setting. Fellowships can be either 1 to 2 years. Kim and I are both in 2-year programs, but there are 1-year programs out there. And residencies, on the other hand, you have the PGY1, that's like more of a general practice. And then you have like I guess I would say an optional specialty year for a PGY2. So to give you a little background on the Rutgers program, it's a pretty well-established program now. It was founded 36 years ago. Since then, each year since then, Dr. Barone, shown on the left, has continuously found ways to improve the program. And that's why RPIF, the Rutgers Fellowship Program, is very widely recognized by pharmaceutical companies as a leading pharmaceutical industry fellowship program. This year, we also welcomed this very nice lady right here, Dr. Carolyn Seiss. She's now the director of the program. And so these three, along with another person named Dr. Fierro, work together to foster the professional development of fellows. And they're always available for guidance while allowing fellows to basically run the program. So we have fellows that take on chief fellow roles, chair positions, committees. And so there's a lot of leadership opportunities, as we'll talk about. So the RPIF program mission. So Like I said, it fosters the growth and development of its fellows in the pharmaceutical and biopharmaceutical industry by offering several different things. So number one, opportunities to accelerate your career path in industry through a variety of specialty training programs. The Rutgers program is pretty, I think it's nationally recognized and pretty well trusted as a bridge to industry for pharmacists. And it provides a very diverse array of opportunities for you to explore the pharmaceutical industry. Another mission is it has an established history with a large network of leading companies and distinguished alumni. So partner companies include several of the top global companies, and we'll talk about which companies are partners with us. And they offer positions throughout the world and across the nation. And the program has trained over 1,000 fellows who hold pretty prominent positions throughout the pharmaceutical industry. Another mission is investing in the development of fellows and supporting the advancement of pharmacists in industry. So a lot of the preceptors that we have are PharmDs, and they're also often past fellows and graduates of the program. So they really understand what a fellow needs to develop and obtain a successful career in the industry. The program continuously grows and evolves to ensure that fellows are exposed to a variety of career opportunities as a pharmacist in industry. And it's a pretty rigorous training program, so it makes you'll be really competitive by the end of the program. And lastly, there's unique professional and leadership opportunities offered through both Rutgers and the partner companies. So fellows are encouraged to explore career paths and have rotational opportunities through various industries on a select basis. We also have this professional development series and community involvement opportunities that provide exclusive education resources and tools that allow us to sharpen our business and technical skills, which will be very critical for success in industry. So ultimately, the goal of this slide is just to emphasize the importance of a fellowship. And I wanted to mention that I knew a couple people that did obtain a fellowship obtain a job in industry straight out of pharmacy school, but it's pretty rare in my experience. And the nice thing about these fellowship is it's just kind of like a way to get your foot in the door. And although I don't want to say that the fellowship guarantees you a job at the end, most people by the end of the fellowship will have a job in industry waiting for them if they choose to apply to industry. So the fellowship program has made a significant impact on the role of the pharmacist in the pharmaceutical industry. As of 2019, over 1,000 program alumni are practicing worldwide, including various pharmaceutical companies, medical communication companies, governmental agencies, and advertising agencies. And the program is constantly expanding and accelerating career paths for pharmacists into many novel practice options, including drug development. So that includes clinical research as well as regulatory. We also have opportunities in marketing and market research. So if you have that business mind, there's also medical affairs and medical science liaisons. And there's a lot of little like subcategories within those. So there's tons of opportunity. And a lot of as I've previously mentioned, a lot of the alumni of this program have reached mid to senior management level positions and are highly influential in developing company policies and decision making. So overall, this program really sets you up for success in industry. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the RPIF program curriculum. So there's two main components. There's the industry component and the Rutgers component. I would say about 90 to 95% of my time is spent doing the industry component. So at my pharmaceutical company, Genentech. And maybe 5 to 10% of my time is spent doing Rutgers related activities. So 2-year fellows frequently have the opportunity to, something to mention is that 2-year fellows have the opportunity to rotate outside of their core departments for an agreed period of time, although not required. So when you apply to like a main core function, and then you have opportunities to rotate outside and experience other things. And these rotational opportunities are really diverse. You can rotate within the company or outside the company, depending on how your discussion goes with your preceptor, and oftentimes you'll be able to get those opportunities. On the Rutgers side, it's mainly designed for developing your leadership skills and soft skills, presentation skills, things like that, which will be important for building your CV. So a big part of that is the professional development days that we have every month, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And there's just a lot of opportunities for fellows to coordinate and teach pharmacy school courses, author posters, manuscripts, conduct research, precept pharmacy students, educate pharmacy students about fellowship opportunities, and lead committees. So this slide is just about the scholarly activities. So this is part of the Rutgers component where you are involved in research and you have opportunities to present your work at conferences, and have publications in peer-reviewed journals. So you can see a lot of our fellows have been involved in posters and then they present them prior to the pandemic. So these are, as of 2022, these are the current partner companies. There's 21 of them. I'm sure everybody in this call can recognize at least one of these companies in here. So a lot of these are top global pharmaceutical companies. And within our program, we offer a really diverse range of pharmaceutical companies in terms of like small versus medium versus large size companies to meet whatever need the fellow has. Many alumni end up serving as preceptors or mentors for fellows at partner companies. So it's really nice. My current preceptor is a past fellow. And most of our partner companies are located in what's called the tri-state area. So that's New Jersey, New York, and Eastern Pennsylvania. And they're separated by only about like an hour or less of travel time. The exception to that is Genentech, where Kim and I are at, and there's also Amgen, which are based in California. And then there's AstraZeneca, which is in the Delaware, DC area. But in general, the advantage of having most of the companies close together is that during those professional development days, which a lot of times are at the Rutgers University, they can sometimes be hosted at pharmaceutical companies where fellows, even if I'm a Genentech fellow, I'll have the opportunity to meet if Merck is hosting it, I'll have opportunities to meet people at Merck. So it's a really nice opportunity. And now I'm going to just talk really quickly about preparing for interviews. So, or preparing for interviews and preparing for just the application process. So the main thing that we ask of you is to have a PharmD by July 1st, 2022 from an ACPE accredited pharmacy program. And another thing to note is that attendance at ASHP mid-year is not necessarily required. So some of the requirements for interviewing this year, almost all the action is happening on the RPIF application portal, which is going to be opening on October 22nd. Within the portal, you'll be able to upload your CV, your letter of intent, and your 3 letters of recommendation. And this year, we're limiting candidates to applying to a maximum of 10 positions within Rutgers. And then interview requests will be open from October 22nd all the way to November 1st, which is we say it's a soft stop. And then for anybody that applies afterwards, they might be considered at a company's discretion, but we highly, highly recommend you apply before that time, before November 1st. And interviews are going to be conducted on a rolling basis from the 8th to the 19th of November. And in order for you to get your first round interview, you have to have uploaded your CV and your letter of intent. And then the letters of recommendation are due by December 5th. So this slide is about Find, which unfortunately has already happened. So if you were interested, I hope you attended that. But yeah, I think I might just move past this slide. I don't think there's anything relevant here, but here we have, on this slide, we have the networking sessions. So these have not happened yet and they start next week. So October 12th through the 14th and October 18th through 21st. So these will be a virtual opportunity for you to, we're going to be providing you kind of an overview of the different functional areas, and you'll have an opportunity to participate in a Q&A panel session with fellows, and hopefully some preceptors will be there too. And I think each pharmaceutical company will be hosting their own networking session, and it'll be split up by functional areas. So you'll be able to really learn a lot about each of those positions and how to prepare yourself for the interviews. And this is my last slide before I hand it off to Kim. So interview prep tips. So the earlier you submit, the better. Sending thank you emails is another often overlooked aspect of interviews. I think this is really appreciated by people when you send thank you emails. It used to be people would carry around like cards and they would give thank you cards to the people that interviewed them. But unfortunately, it's going to be virtual this year. So sending some kind of like virtual card or email to whoever interviewed you is a really good way to kind of stand out. Making sure to interview in a quiet, well-lit room with appropriate camera angles. So I'm sure by this point in the pandemic, you all have really good Zoom etiquette, but just remembering all those things is really important in terms of your setup. Another thing we recommend is attending outreaches and webinars, which is what you're doing right now, which is great. Making sure to really know the positions that you're applying to before you walk into the interview, because in the interviews you will undoubtedly be asked about. We're hoping that you'll be able to show us what you know about the position before you come in. You don't have to be an expert on it by any means, but just knowing a little bit about it is great. Making sure to arrive on time is really important. Having that strong internet connection and a good mic and a good camera. Dressing professionally as if we had been in person is also another really important tip. And then if you can, relax and be yourself. All right, now I'm going to hand it over to Kim.
All right, so we talked about how to apply and we talked about the Rutgers Pharmaceutical Industry Fellowship program, but do any of you know, kind of have an idea of what PharmDs can do in industry? Or is this all just new to you? Feel free to type in the chat if you know of any titles or if know anybody in industry or kind of have an idea of what you can do. Okay, so I'm seeing crickets, I'm hearing crickets, so that's a good thing. That's why we're here. I am an OSU alum myself, and I definitely didn't know what you can do in industry because a lot of schools don't have a very strong industry background, but that's what we're here to chat about. So next slide, please. Just go ahead and click through until all the way. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so these are just some of the opportunities for PharmDs in the pharmaceutical industry. They fall into 4 main buckets. So we have research and development, or R&D. This is where Wahib is in. So we have things like clinical pharmacology. You can be involved in early phase or late phase clinical trial development, clinical operations. So, you know, really managing the vendors and managing everything about the clinical trial and make sure it runs smoothly. We have medical affairs. This is the umbrella that I'm in. And this is probably the one that pharmacy students are most familiar with, especially the MSL role, the medical science liaison. You might call them drug reps. So medical affairs really communicates medical information from the company to whoever the audience may be, whether it is a provider or the patient or, what have you, the payer. So some things in medical affair include medical strategy. We have medical information. So, when you're on rotation and your preceptor is asking you to call a manufacturer about an excursion or, a question about a drug, medical information is, a lot of pharmacists will work in medical information and answer those questions. Publications, medical education, and then HEOR is health economics outcomes research. It'll be in medical affairs at some companies, and other companies it'll be its own umbrella. And then we have commercial. This is marketing, market access, business intelligence, commercial intelligence, business development. So, you can do anything from reviewing marketing campaigns. If a product has direct to consumer marketing campaigns, you can really research on how to get your product into access, how to get it onto formularies, how to get hospitals to utilize your drug. Business development at Genentech, we call it pharma partnering, but basically looking at smaller companies or labs and seeing if any of them have products that you might want to invest in, and then you invest in and develop your own product with that. We have regulatory affairs, advertising and promotion, regulatory strategy, drug safety, risk management, and then advocacy and policy. So these are just some of the things that PharmDs can do in industry. Next slide, please. And then just because you are involved in one function doesn't necessarily mean that that's the only thing that you're going to be doing. There's a lot of cross-functional interaction within the pharmaceutical industry. So for example, myself in medical affairs, medical is the medical expert, the clinical expert. And so I will act as the medical reviewer for a, like Xofluza was an example of a Genentech drug that I'm working on, and Xofluza has drug commercials. So I will work with commercial and particularly marketing, as well as regulatory. So marketing will make sure that the message that we want to convey is coming across. I make sure that all of the data are accurate. Regulatory makes sure that it's up to FDA standards. So that's just an example of some cross-functional collaboration that you may have. Next slide. Okay, and then so for this slide, we're just gonna start going into each function. This is by no means an all-encompassing list or description, but so this is just kind of an overview of the drug development process. We have drug discovery and then preclinical research, and then we go into the clinical trials, and I'm sure you're all familiar with phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4 trials. And so focusing on the drug discovery and preclinical periods, clinical development is a really big role for pharmacists to go into. Fellows who work in clinical development are involved in various aspects of the clinical trial process, and duties may differ depending on the phase of the clinical trial. So you may be involved in planning and managing a study. Maybe you get to author a protocol or amend a protocol, development of study-related regulatory documents, managing the budgets, tracking trials and reporting any outcomes. So that's a really big area that PharmDs can go into. Then next slide. And then development operations, so clinical operations. These teams develop and execute plans to efficiently run clinical trials. And the ultimate goal is to make sure that the data is accurate and you're controlling patient safety and mitigating any risks. And so this includes overseeing vendors, like I talked about earlier. Maybe the trial is a multi-center trial in different countries. And so you act as the liaison between trial sites in different countries, managing the study supply and budgets for the product. And then overall just working as a member of a cross-functional team. Next slide. So then now we have medical affairs and medical strategy. So like I said earlier, medical affairs is a really big umbrella term. And inside we have medical science liaisons, we have medical information, medical communications. And so what you all are probably most familiar with is the medical science liaison. So medical science liaisons are kind of an overarching like healthcare consultant. They present information to the healthcare providers, to the payers, to whoever the customer is. We're the drug rep, or they are the drug reps, but instead of trying to sell a product, it's communicating safety information, communicating efficacy information. Trials are always ongoing. There's always new data being published. There's always new data presented at different conferences. And so kind of the only way that providers can keep up with all of the new data are through these medical science liaisons. I am in medical communication and medical information, and so I actually am on call today, but I'm on call in the call center, answering any questions that may come up, medical communication, creating content for the MSLs to use, also making sure content have accurate data if we're submitting to a journal or to a payer for incorporation into their formulary. And then medical education, medical affairs can make disease education decks, therapeutic area education decks, and really teach people about the mechanism of action for some of our products. Okay, next slide, please. So this slide is just a big overview of the medical science liaison role. Like I said, these are healthcare consultants pretty much, and they present or they represent whatever company they work for, the pharmaceutical company they work for, and make sure that all the information that's out there and available is accurate. And these individuals really act as specialists in either a particular therapeutic area or a particular product. Next slide. All right, so now we have HEOR, or Health Economics Outcomes Research. I always have to think about that when I say that acronym, but basically HEOR's job is to combine real world evidence, so phase 4 and beyond, and then different type of analyses such as cost-effective analyses and cost benefit to really show value. That's kind of the main driver here, is value in treatment. Why is one product better than the other for patients? So HEOR specialists work cross-functionally in various teams to assess any unmet needs in a therapeutic area and how we can break into that space and why this particular product is better than any other. And this is actually one of the more popular roles for PharmD graduates, at least now, because it really encompasses a lot of the managed care components that you learn in school. And it's kind of really stats heavy. And so you get to utilize the concepts that you learn in classes more so. Okay, and the next slide. So now we're moving on to regulatory affairs. I know, at least for me, whenever I heard the term regulatory affairs, I always thought FDA or legal and laws, regulations. And so regulatory affairs is involved in all of the drug development process. In general, the job of regulatory affairs is to bring the molecule from animal studies or preclinical trials to approval by the governing body. So in our case, the FDA. And throughout the whole process, we not only have to keep the regulations that are currently in place in mind, but also keep past precedents in mind to ensure that drugs and devices that we develop meet these patient needs. Let's see. Next slide. So go ahead and tap through until we get all the speech bubbles. Okay, so one thing that PharmDs can do in regulatory affairs is advertising and promotion, or we like to call it reg ad promo. So on top of monitoring adverse events from use, regulatory affairs is also heavily involved in promotional materials. So like I said earlier, medical affairs acts as the medical reviewer. Regulatory ad promo will act as the regulatory reviewer, making sure that everything is compliant to rules in place. And so these promotional materials that regulatory may be involved in can be anything from TV ads, brochures that you might see in a doctor's office, iPad apps, iPhone apps, websites, anything like that. And so as the advertising and promotion regulatory specialist, you'll be working with your legal team, you'll be working with your medical officer, your marketing team, to make sure that all of the promotional material is being distributed in a manner that makes sure everything is well balanced and information is presented as accurately as possible. and with the ultimate goal of protecting the public from, any misinformation. All right, next slide. Okay, so now we're moving into commercial and marketing in particular. So the role of marketing in the pharmaceutical industry is extremely broad. It begins as early as looking for what compounds to invest in, so pharma partnering or business development, to figuring out how it fits into the competitive landscape. So you have your competitive intelligence. Are there already products on the market? What are our competitors doing? Does this mechanism already exist? And if so, what place in therapy is it? Then we have, the obvious marketing, TV commercials, brochures, websites, Twitter accounts. A lot of drug companies have Twitter accounts specifically for each product. So a lot of the function of commercial is to create promotional materials and the message platform. And again, cross-functional marketing will work in really close proximity with legal, with medical, and with regulatory to create all of these materials. Okay, next slide. So in summary, there's a lot of different things that PharmDs can do in industry, and we really hope that you find something that really fits your needs and your interests as a pharmacy student. The RPIF program offers fellowships in all of these functional areas, and we also provide a challenging and supportive environment, networking and mentorship opportunities, because we have over 200 fellows at the moment, and it's growing every year. Your network is really big and really broad, and you get to really meet people not only in your function, but outside of your function in case you ever change your mind. There's also lots of opportunities for research, for publications, teaching, and leadership. And it's just an overall great place to be. Next slide, please. These are just some pictures of some of our fellows. Again, you can see this, at least the last picture here, there's so many people, and that's your whole cohort. That's everybody that you get to interact with during your 2 years in the program and beyond. And then now we have a couple knowledge checks. Feel free to type in the chat. And we're not going to go over every single question, but the first one, as part of a Rutgers Fellowship, fellows must complete both an industry component and the Rutgers component. So feel free to type in the chat true or false. And that's true. Good job. Okay. Okay, all of the following are attributes of a fellowship, except for, I'm not going to read through all of these answers, but feel free to type in the chat. So that is false, Rosa. Competitive stipends are offered through Rutgers. But yes, inpatient, outpatient settings. So residency, you'll be in an inpatient or outpatient setting, and in a fellowship, you'll be in more of a corporate setting.
I will say the stipend it's relative. The competitiveness of the stipend is relative. Here in the Bay Area, at least I'm struggling to live with the stipend, but in other areas, it might be a little bit easier.
Yeah, and as a Bay Area fellow, we do get paid a little bit more than our East Coast counterparts, but it's the Bay Area, so it's really expensive. But right now, everything's virtual, so you may or may not have to move. Okay, how can you start preparing now to land a fellowship position with Rutgers? All right, yep, all of the above.
Nice.
I think we're just going to skip through the rest of these knowledge checks and leave some time for any questions that you may have. Let's just skip through these. Okay, so our website seen here is pharmafellows.rutgers.edu. This website will have all the information you need to get your application up and running. Also has all of the company brochures. So if you're P1, P2, P3, and you're not necessarily sure what you want to do, you can take a browse through these brochures and see if any of these job descriptions look interesting to you, and try to see how you can incorporate that into your pharmacy school curriculum. There's a Facebook group. There's also a LinkedIn page group if you want to join that. So the websites are there for you to review. But now, and then next slide has all of our social media accounts if you want to follow those for news and updates. But the next slide we do ask, I'm actually just going to copy this link into the chat, but we do ask that you fill out this survey just so that our preceptors know that we spent this time talking to you all instead of, dinking around. And while we do that, feel free to turn your microphone on or type any questions that you have in the chat, and we'll be happy to answer those for you.
All right, thank you both so much for giving us that presentation. So I was curious, how soon did you guys start preparing for applying to a fellowship program?
Like how soon or?
Did you start in your P4 year, or did you start as a P3 in the summer between, or even earlier than that?
Do you want to take this, Wahid,
Yeah,
or do you want me to?
Sure. I guess I don't know what you mean necessarily by preparing, but I decided that I want to do a fellowship maybe by the summer of my P2 year, I would say. And during the summer of my P2 year, I ended up doing a internship at a pharmaceutical company close by my school. So I would say around P2 year was when I was really thinking about a fellowship and trying to get experiences that I felt like I could leverage to, especially during my interviews. But the hardcore like application process and like organizing my CV, writing up a letter of intent, all that stuff happened definitely in my P4 year, probably like a couple of months before the application deadline. So maybe like 3 months before the summer, before the applications were due, I started to really hone in, get my CVs done, have a ton of different people check my CVs. I don't know if at OSU, if you have like a career center, but at UCSF, we had this career center where we could go and like show them our letters of intent, our CVs, and they would basically tear it apart for us and then give us a lot of really great advice. So I would highly recommend doing that in the next couple months. So yeah, I think that's kind of how I approached the application process.
Yeah, let me just echo Wahib with the Career Center. So I know from what I remember, I think College of Pharmacy had their own, like professional development thing. But I think what a lot of pharmacy students forget is that you're also Oregon State University students. And so you have access to like the College of Business, Career Center, and they're really great resources too, especially because the CV for fellowships is a lot different than the CV for residencies. And so a lot of the feedback that you'll get through the College of Pharmacy is going to be more catered towards a residency CV, which is much longer, right? With fellowships, your CV is going to be like a normal CV, like a 3 to 4 page CV at max. But I kind of in the same boat as Wahib. I identified that I wanted to do, I guess, non-traditional pharmacy P2 year, not necessarily knowing if I wanted to do industry or managed care. And so I spent most of my pharmacy school, or all of the rest of pharmacy school, in managed care. And then like 3 or 4 months before applications open, that's when I started looking at fellowship programs, like making my spreadsheet. Like I created them, but I didn't really do anything in depth because brochures are not uploaded by then yet. And then brochures are typically uploaded like about a month before applications open. And so that was really when I started identifying which programs I want to apply to. But it's helpful to know what function you want to apply to before that, so that you can narrow down what companies you want to apply for. And then interview prep, there's a lot of different resources on the internet for interview prep, and they're all very helpful. Oh, I think you're muted.
I was saying that was very helpful for anyone from a P1 to a P4 to know that even if you decide really late that there's time to prepare, you don't have to start
absolutely.
the entire summer a year before or anything.
Yeah.
And then on the topic of letters of recommendation, was there anything specific you did to build a relationship with somebody that could write a letter for you, or who did you generally pick?
I can start. I never tried to make relationships thinking this person is going to write me a letter. It kind of was the flip. It was, who do I have a really good relationship with that can write me a strong letter? So I did research throughout pharmacy school, and I worked with that faculty member a lot. And so I thought this person can really help write a strong letter for me. If you're involved in clubs, your student organizations, your faculty member can always speak to your skills because they've worked with you. If you have internships at all, like I know OSU doesn't, we don't have any relationships with pharmaceutical companies. And so, you know, you might work in retail, but your manager, you work with them every day and that they know you really well. So just looking for people who can speak to your skills rather than looking for somebody and then building a relationship with them. Because I feel like those people can always tell too if the relationship is genuine or not. You know, like if you're just talking to somebody because you want them to later on write you a letter, they can kind of tell.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Kim. I basically, yeah, after when I was applying, I just thought about which rotation did I feel like I really developed a strong relationship with the preceptor. For me, it was like my acute care one where I was really in like every day for many hours in contact with my preceptor. I also looked at my internships that I had done. So internships, I had one preceptor from a pharmaceutical company that I worked with. I chose them. And I actually knew a couple people who did approach their rotations from the very start of their rotation by basically saying, okay, I want a letter of recommendation. What can I do during this rotation to get a letter of rec by the end? So that did actually work out for some people. However, I agree with Kim that it's like not the best way to do things because it just doesn't come off genuine. And I think the ones I don't know how much of a quality letter you'll get out of that kind of relationship with a preceptor where you are just upfront about your main purpose is to get a letter out of them and not really anything else. I think the most quality letters of rec come out of just you do a really great job with your rotation without really thinking too much about the letter of rec, and then afterwards then you reflect on the rotation, and then you make decision if you feel like the relationship you built with that preceptor was strong enough, and that they can write you a strong letter of rec. And when I was asking my preceptors, I would ask them upfront at the very end of the rotations. I would say, if I had felt good about the rotation, I would say, do you think you can write me a strong letter of recommendation? And then I would always get a yes. And I think most preceptors will give you a yes at that point. But a few months later, when I actually wanted to get the letter of rec from them, then I would send them a list of things I wanted them to highlight. So I wanted them to highlight my teamwork skills, how well I worked with patients, or whatever skill you want them to highlight. Make sure to let them know, and it will help guide them and help guide the letter of rec.
Yeah, I did the same thing. I did a column of skills I wanted to highlight and then a column of things that I did with that person that they could speak to, just to give them some examples. Any other questions?
Those are great questions, by the way.
I had a question. So when it comes to like the APPEs and stuff that you talked about where you got recommendations, are there any APPEs that you guys did that felt prepared you for your fellowship or maybe helped you get the fellowship by doing that rotation?
I think it depends on the function that you want to go into, right? If you want to do something in commercial, especially at OSU, there's really no, I don't know, what else can you transfer to commercial other than like a business admin type of rotation? My role is very managed care focused, and that was kind of my goal from pharmacy school, was something along the realm of managed care, whether it's in managed care or in industry. And so most of my experiences were in managed care. Like research and development, you probably would do research Wahid can speak to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it helps if you have a rotation that was in industry, but you don't necessarily have to have had an industry rotation to get a fellowship, if that makes sense. I know a couple people who got a fellowship without really having any industry experience. I'm not exactly sure how they decided they want to do a fellowship, but they still got it without the experience. I think just the opportunity to, I don't think it really matters what specific rotation you get a letter of rec from. I think it's more, I think the more important part is like what specific skills that you developed at that rotation, the soft skills, like the presentation skills or the team working skills. How will you manage your deadlines? How will you, how organized you are? Those are the things that you want for a letter of rec. So you don't necessarily need to have your letter of rec come from a pharmaceutical industry person. It can
And
come from
if you have a particular therapeutic area that you want to work in, like I'm in respiratory and you, let's say I wanted only to apply to respiratory programs because I really enjoy respiratory. I would have wanted a rotation in respiratory. So I think if you can't get industry fellowships, which I know as an OSU alum, it's really difficult, you can go that route so that you really strengthen your clinical knowledge and then you can reflect that into the work that you do. Like oncology is a really great example because we definitely don't spend enough time in oncology at OSU. And so if you can get an oncology rotation, that'll really help you for an oncology fellowship.
If there's time for another question, I had a lot of P1s ask me about the MBA degree program that a lot of schools offer simultaneous with the PharmD degree. Have you noticed whether a lot of fellows also did that or if it was helpful at all?
I was actually in the PharmD MBA program my P1 year, and then I decided that I didn't want to pursue it anymore. In terms of, I guess there's a lot of people with MBAs, but there's also a lot of people without it. And I think it just depends on what you want to do, how helpful it is. Because if you want to do something in commercial, it's probably really helpful to have had taken business classes. For me in medical affairs and specifically medical information and medical communication, I don't necessarily need it. So it just really depends on what you want to do with it.
Yeah, I had a similar experience. I haven't seen many. I'm more on the research side, research and development side, so I don't see very many MBAs. I think I've seen a couple MBAs like in the fellowship cohort, but those are usually like business marketing type of people. On the research side, it's mostly like PharmDs, and then I've met once in a while I meet like a PharmD PhD, although that's kind of rare. But yeah, the MBA I don't see as much, at least on the research side.
Yeah. We have a question in the chat from V. She's a P3. What has been the most impactful experience for you during your fellowship so far and why? Do you want to take a stab at this, Sahib?
Give me a second to think about this.
I know, let me give me a second too. Most impactful experience. I guess for me, when I was on rotation in managed care, I did rotations at 3 different health plans. I got to kind of see like the Medicaid testimonies. So drug reps will come in and talk during Medicaid testimonies during the P&T meeting. And now on the other side, I'm part of the team that creates the content for these testimonies. And so it's been really impactful to just kind of have like an aha moment of this is how everything fits together. Like how does industry interact with pharmacy, interact with, big payers. So that's been a really interesting one. Also, my first few months I actually just got switched over to respiratory last week, but the 2 or 3 months before that, I was actually in oncology. And that was super interesting because I knew nothing about oncology going in. And I had to create all these submissions to payers about like a drug for lung cancer that like with a specific gene that I'd never heard of. And so it was just a great learning experience for me. And I'd say that those really impacted me. It made me not close off because I hated oncology before. And now I'm like, it's really not that bad. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, it isn't that bad. Yeah, I think for me, one of the most impactful aspects of my fellowship. So I feel like industry gets a really bad rep, especially on the clinical side, where people often view pharmaceutical industry as just this profit driven machine, basically, that doesn't really care so much about patients, but rather making money. But at least on the research side, I work with a lot of clinical science. So I'm a clinical scientist, and I work with a lot of other clinical scientists and medical monitors, and seeing their passion to help patients, especially right now I'm working in sickle cell and other rare blood disorders, and seeing their passion to make a difference in these patients' lives. These patients have very limited therapeutic options, and so being a part of this mission and this mission to create new therapeutics for people has been really impactful. And Genentech at least does a lot of work to in terms of like patient recruitment. So we spend a lot of time trying to learn about the patients, the communities that are affected most by sickle cell disease, by having direct interactions with those communities. And then we design our clinical trials based off the interactions, based off what do we learn about the most troublesome part of their lives. What is it, and what how can we optimize our molecules to be able to target those aspects of their lives? For sickle cell, they have a lot of these like pain crises, so we try to optimize our molecule to um, maybe improve that aspect of their disease and the disease burden. So I guess the most impactful part is just realizing that all these people that I'm working with are so passionate about helping patients at the end of the day, and I love that. I love being part of that mission. You're muted.
I think we have time for one more question if there is, and if there's not, then we can go ahead and end this early, but don't be shy.
I had a question. So what are some differences in the experiences that you'd get in applying to a small versus a bigger company?
I mean, neither of us are at a smaller company, so we can only assume, but I think in a bigger company, at least for me, like I said, I started off in oncology and right now I'm in respiratory. And I think if I were at a smaller company, I wouldn't have as much opportunity to bounce around different projects. Because even though right now I'm assigned to a product in respiratory, I'm part of the flu squad. If I really wanted to do something with an ophthalmology product or, a hematology product, or hemophilia product, I mean, I can totally do that. And I think at a smaller company, it might be a little bit more difficult because there's so many specialists. Like there's like that one specialist for that team that they might not want somebody else kind of jumping in. But with a bigger company, it's like there's more things to do. They might need more help. So that's one thing I think would be different. I think resources are really big too. Like as a fellow, you can pull that fellow card, pop a one-on-one into somebody's calendar, like a director or something in a different team. And you have so many more different people that you can connect with and say, hey, I'm a fellow, I want to learn more about your journey. And when you're in a smaller company, there's maybe a smaller pool of people to do that with. So those are just some things. But like I said, I've never been at a smaller company, so I wouldn't know.
Yeah, I haven't either, unfortunately. I don't know very much about smaller companies, but
Right.
I would imagine everything that Kim just said, it just makes sense to me. Yeah, I don't have much to
Okay.
add,
And
unfortunately.
we have, this is a really great question, and we have 2 minutes to address this. So if you didn't get the fellowship but wanted to enter industry or apply again during another cycle, what were your backup plans? My backup plan was just to apply for an entry level like medical information role. Like I wasn't planning, I was not going to apply for residency if I didn't get a fellowship. But yeah, there's a lot of, you can do things in industry without a fellowship if you really wanted to. It's a lot harder, but it's definitely there.
Yeah, if I hadn't got it, I probably, so something that was on my mind towards the end of the pharmacy school was getting a PhD. So if I hadn't gotten the fellowship, I might have hopped into a PhD program and then reapplied after I got my PhD, but definitely always wanted to be in pharmaceutical industry at some point. So the PhD would be purely just to, I guess, boost my CV and also learn a little bit more. And then also just make me more competitive for fellowship the second time around.
We do have a couple people in our cohort who did like other things before fellowship, and they didn't necessarily apply right out of school, or they unfortunately weren't able to secure a fellowship at that time and then reapplied. And so there's always options, and there's always things that you can do to, it's like the same thing as residency. If you don't get a residency, you get some experience somewhere else. So.
Any more questions?
I think that might be it. If anybody comes up with any more questions, or if anybody that watches the recording has any questions, I'll have them send it to me and I'll forward it to you.
Yeah.
And yeah, are the emails I have from you during setting up this event, is that okay?
Yeah. For me, that's the ideal email. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I'll use that one then. Thank you both so much for coming and giving us this information, and the Q&A session was really helpful.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, we'd love to have you back another year. I don't know if is this something that Rutgers does every year, or was this something that you guys kind of did of your own initiative?
Rutgers does this every year. OSU was never on the list because there's never been an OSU alum,
I
but
see. Okay.
OSU's on the list now. So we'll have signups for next year too. It probably won't be us, but somebody will be here to present. So
Perfect. Thank you for
Yeah.
doing the pioneering for OSU.
yeah, of course.
Yeah.
All right. Well, have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
All right. See y'all later.
Bye.